My name is Camille Rodriguez. I'm 29 years old, and the day my family decided I wasn't worth celebrating began with a text message that shattered everything I thought I knew about love. The notification popped up while I was reviewing quarterly reports at my accounting firm in downtown Phoenix. It was from my cousin Derek, and it contained 3 words that would change my life forever. Congrats on Natasha's engagement. Let us know in the comments where you're watching. If this resonated, don't miss out on subscribing because tomorrow I'm sharing something that will completely change how you think about this topic. But here's the thing. I had no idea my sister was even dating anyone seriously. I stared at my phone screen, reading those words over and over until they blurred together. Natasha. Engaged. How could my own sister be engaged and I didn't know? My hands trembled as I scrolled through Derek's message thread, finding photo after photo from what looked like an elaborate engagement party. There was Natasha in a flowing white dress, beaming next to a tall man with dark hair I'd never seen before. There were my parents, Patricia and Antonio Rodriguez, raising champagne glasses with proud smiles painted across their faces. There was our extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, all gathered in what appeared to be the ballroom of the Phoenician Resort. Everyone was there. Everyone except me. I called Derek immediately, my voice shaking as I asked when this party had happened. "Last night," he said, confusion creeping into his tone. "Wait, weren't you there? I thought I saw—" "Oh." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "Camille, I'm sorry, I just assumed—" That's when the full weight of it hit me. This wasn't an oversight. This wasn't a miscommunication or a lost invitation. My family had deliberately planned and executed an engagement party for my sister, inviting dozens of relatives and friends, and had consciously chosen to exclude me. Not only had they excluded me, but they had done it so thoroughly that even my cousins assumed I must have been there. Growing up in the Rodriguez household meant understanding your place in an invisible hierarchy. Natasha was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, who commanded attention simply by walking into a room. At 26, she was everything my traditional Mexican-American family valued. Charming, social, effortlessly beautiful, and skilled at making everyone around her feel like they were the most important person in the world. She worked as a social media manager for a luxury resort chain, a job that seemed to consist mainly of attending glamorous events and posting perfectly curated photos. While Habits posted Instagram stories from rooftop parties in Scottsdale, I was working late nights, building a solid career, saving money, and trying to prove my worth through achievement rather than charisma. Our parents had always made their preferences clear, though never explicitly. At family gatherings, conversations naturally gravitated toward Natasha's latest adventures, the celebrity she'd met at a resort event, the exotic location she'd traveled to for work, the designer dress she'd gotten at a discount. When relatives asked about me, my mother would smile tightly and say, "Camille is doing well, very focused on her career," in a tone that suggested this was somehow less impressive than Natasha's Instagram-worthy lifestyle. The pattern had been established early. I still remember my high school graduation, where I was valedictorian and had earned a full scholarship to Arizona State University. During the family dinner afterward, my achievement was mentioned briefly, before the conversation shifted to Natasha's upcoming quinceañera, which was still 6 months away, but had already consumed months of planning and thousands of dollars. My academic success was acknowledged with a nod. Her party was celebrated with detailed discussions about dress fittings and venue selection. When I graduated from ASU summa cum laude with my accounting degree, the family dinner lasted exactly 1 hour before my parents began planning Natasha's college send-off party. When I got my CPA certification, my mother shared one Facebook post about it. When Natasha posted a photo of herself at a resort in Cabo for work, it received dozens of comments from family members about how proud they were and how glamorous her life was. The exclusion from the engagement party wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of years of being systematically marginalized within my own family. But this felt different. This felt final. An engagement party wasn't just any social gathering, it was a milestone, a moment when families come together to celebrate love and future happiness. By excluding me from this event, my family had sent a clear message. I wasn't important enough to witness my sister's joy. I wasn't valued enough to be included in one of the most significant moments of her life. I left work early that day, claiming I felt sick. It wasn't entirely a lie. My stomach was churning with a mixture of hurt, anger, and disbelief. I drove through the Phoenix heat to my small apartment in Tempe, my mind racing with questions. How long had they been planning this? How many conversations had happened without me? How many family group chats existed that didn't include my name? That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my mother directly. My hands were shaking as I dialed her number, and when she answered with her usual cheerful, "Mija," I could barely find my voice.
"Mom," I said, trying to keep my tone steady, "I heard about Natasha's engagement party. I'm confused about why I wasn't invited." The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost all its warmth. "Camille, you know how you get at family events. You're always so serious, so focused on work. We wanted this to be a joyful celebration, and—" She trailed off, but the implication hung in the air like smoke. "And what, Mom? And I would have ruined it somehow? You don't really fit in with that crowd, Mija. Natasha's friends, her work people, they're very social, very outgoing. We thought it would be uncomfortable for everyone." The words hit me like a physical blow. My own mother was telling me that I was too awkward, too serious, too much of a social liability to be included in my sister's engagement celebration. In her mind, protecting Natasha's perfect moment was more important than including her own daughter. After we hung up, I sat in the silence of my apartment, staring at the walls I had painted myself, surrounded by the furniture I had carefully saved for and purchased piece by piece. Everything in this space represented my independence, my hard work, my ability to build a life on my own terms. But suddenly, it all felt hollow. What was the point of success if your own family saw you as an embarrassment? What was the point of achievement if the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally found you too awkward to include in their celebrations? That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized that I had been living a lie. I had convinced myself that if I just worked hard enough, achieved enough, proved my worth through professional success, my family would eventually see my value. But the engagement party exclusion had stripped away that illusion. To them, I would always be the awkward daughter, the one who didn't quite fit, the one whose presence was more of a burden than a blessing. Something shifted in me that night. The hurt was still there, raw and aching, but underneath it was something else, a quiet determination. If my family had decided I didn't belong in their version of happiness, then maybe it was time I stopped trying to fit into their story and started writing my own.
If you're loving what you're hearing, smash that subscribe button. It really keeps us going. All right, let's jump back in.
What my family never understood was that being excluded had taught me something valuable, how to build a life that didn't depend on their approval. While they were busy planning parties I wasn't invited to, I had been quietly constructing something they knew nothing about. 6 months before Natasha's engagement party, I had started a side business that would change everything. It began innocently enough. A coworker at the accounting firm, Jessica, had mentioned she was drowning in financial chaos. Her small bakery was profitable, but she had no idea how to manage the books, handle taxes, or plan for growth. She offered to pay me to help organize her finances on weekends. That first Saturday at Jessica's bakery, Sweet Dreams in downtown Tempe, I discovered something unexpected. I wasn't just good at organizing numbers. I was exceptional at seeing patterns that business owners missed. Within 3 hours, I had identified $2,000 in monthly expenses that could be eliminated and found a tax deduction strategy that would save her $8,000 annually. More importantly, I had created a financial roadmap that would allow her to expand to a second location within 18 months.
Jessica was so impressed that she insisted on paying me double what we had agreed upon. But more than the money, it was the look of relief and gratitude in her eyes that sparked something inside me. For the first time in years, I felt genuinely needed and appreciated for exactly who I was: methodical, detail-oriented, and quietly brilliant with numbers. Word spread quickly through Jessica's network. Small business owners in Phoenix desperately needed financial guidance, but couldn't afford big accounting firms that charged premium rates. I started taking on one client per month, then two, then four. I worked evenings and weekends, transforming cluttered financial records into organized systems, helping struggling entrepreneurs understand their cash flow, and designing growth strategies that actually worked. I called my consultancy Desert Bloom Financial, a name that reflected both our Arizona location and the idea that businesses could flourish with the right care. I chose not to tell my family about it. Every Sunday dinner, when my parents asked about work, I simply said, "The accounting firm keeps me busy," and let them assume I was referring to my day job. They never asked for details, and I never volunteered them. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my family saw me as socially awkward and professionally unremarkable, my clients were experiencing me as insightful, communicative, and transformative. Maria Santos, who owned a struggling restaurant in South Phoenix, told me I had saved her American dream after I restructured her debt and negotiated better terms with her suppliers. Carlos Mendez, whose landscaping business was hemorrhaging money, credited me with helping him land his first major commercial contract by showing him how to price his services properly.
Within 6 months, Desert Bloom Financial had 12 regular clients and a waiting list. I was earning an additional $3,000 per month on top of my day job salary. But more importantly, I was building something that was entirely mine, a reputation based on competence, results, and the quiet satisfaction of helping people achieve their dreams. The transformation wasn't just financial. Working with small business owners had forced me to develop skills I never knew I possessed. I learned to explain complex financial concepts in simple terms. I became comfortable presenting growth strategies to groups of skeptical entrepreneurs. I discovered that my careful, methodical approach wasn't a social liability. It was exactly what overwhelmed business owners needed. Every weekend brought new challenges and victories. I helped a young couple navigate the financial complexities of opening their first food truck. I guided a divorced single mother through the process of turning her crafting hobby into a profitable online business. I assisted a retired veteran in organizing the books for his growing auto repair shop. Each success built my confidence in ways that family approval never could. My clients didn't see me as too serious or socially awkward. They saw me as professional, trustworthy, and remarkably effective. They referred their friends and colleagues to me with genuine enthusiasm. They sent thank you cards and small gifts during the holidays. They created a community around my services, recommending each other for collaborations and partnerships. The contrast with my family dynamic was stark. At Desert Bloom Financial client meetings, I was the expert everyone listened to. My recommendations were implemented, my insights were valued, and my presence was essential to the success of the gathering. At Rodriguez family dinners, I remained the quiet daughter who didn't quite fit, whose opinions were politely tolerated but rarely sought. I began working longer hours on my consultancy, not because I needed the money, but because I craved the sense of purpose it provided. Every financial model I created, every debt restructuring I negotiated, every growth strategy I designed was proof that I was capable of far more than my family imagined. But I kept this world completely separate from them, knowing instinctively that they wouldn't understand its value. The secrecy felt necessary and protective. This was my space, where I could be appreciated for my actual qualities rather than judged for failing to meet their expectations of social charm and conventional success. In the world of Desert Bloom Financial, being thorough wasn't boring, it was essential. Being detail-oriented wasn't antisocial, it was exactly what clients needed to succeed. As my business grew, so did my confidence. I started attending small business networking events, initially terrified, but gradually finding my voice.
I discovered that entrepreneurs valued substance over style, results over charisma. In rooms full of ambitious, hardworking people, my quiet competence was an asset, not a limitation. By the time Natasha's engagement party exclusion happened, I had already begun to internalize a different version of myself. The hurt was still real, but it no longer defined my entire sense of worth. I had 12 clients who considered me essential to their success. I had a growing business that generated both income and genuine satisfaction. I had built something meaningful that existed entirely outside my family's judgment. The engagement party exclusion still stung, but it also clarified something important. While my family was focused on appearances and social performances, I was focused on creating real value for real people. While they were planning events I couldn't attend, I was building a business that would eventually surpass anything they could imagine. That night, after my mother's devastating phone call, I didn't just feel hurt and excluded, I also felt a quiet determination growing stronger. They had decided I didn't fit into their version of success, but I was beginning to understand that their version might not be the only one that mattered. In the morning, I would return to work helping entrepreneurs achieve their dreams, and that work would continue to feed my soul in ways that family approval never could. I opened my laptop and checked my business email. 3 new inquiries had come in since afternoon, each from potential clients who had heard about Desert Bloom Financial through word-of-mouth referrals. As I read their messages describing their financial challenges and goals, I felt something I hadn't experienced at the family dinner table in years. I felt necessary. I felt valued. I felt like exactly the right person for the job. The contrast couldn't have been clearer. My family saw me as too awkward for their celebration, but my clients saw me as essential to their success. The question that began forming in my mind wasn't whether I belonged in my family's story, it was whether their story was worth belonging to at all. The breakthrough that would change everything started with a single phone call on a Tuesday morning in March. I was reviewing tax documents for one of my Desert Bloom Financial clients when my cell phone rang with an unfamiliar Phoenix area code. "Is this Camille Rodriguez from Desert Bloom Financial?" The voice was crisp, professional, unmistakably confident. "Yes, this is Camille. My name is Jonathan Rivera, and I'm the director of the Arizona Small Business Development Center. I've been hearing remarkable things about your work with local entrepreneurs. We have a situation, and frankly, you're the only consultant several of my contacts have recommended." My heart started racing. The Arizona SBDC was the premier organization supporting small businesses throughout the state. They worked with everyone from startup food trucks to multi-million-dollar companies preparing for expansion. Being on their radar meant something significant was about to happen. Jonathan explained that they had been selected to participate in a prestigious national competition called America's Next Business District. The competition sought to revitalize struggling commercial areas across the country by providing intensive business support, financial restructuring, and strategic planning to clusters of small businesses. Phoenix's Midtown District had been chosen as Arizona's representative, but they needed a lead financial consultant who could work with multiple businesses simultaneously while creating an integrated economic development plan. "The timeline is aggressive," Jonathan continued. 6 months to completely transform the financial health and growth potential of 18 businesses in the Midtown corridor. The winning district receives $2.5 million in federal funding, a PBS documentary feature, and long-term partnership opportunities with major corporations. But the real prize is proving that targeted small business support can revitalize entire communities. The businesses ranged from a struggling independent bookstore to a family-owned restaurant that had been losing money for 2 years. There was an auto repair shop whose owner was considering bankruptcy, a boutique fitness studio that couldn't afford proper equipment, and a vintage clothing store that had never implemented any financial tracking systems.
Each business needed comprehensive financial restructuring, but they also needed to work together as a cohesive economic ecosystem. The compensation is $15,000 for the 6-month project, Jonathan said. But honestly, the exposure and credibility you'll gain are worth far more. Every business publication in the Southwest will be covering this competition. If we win, you'll be recognized as the financial architect behind one of the most successful small business revitalizations in the country. I accepted immediately, my mind already racing with possibilities. This wasn't just another consulting contract. This was an opportunity to demonstrate financial expertise on a scale that would be impossible to ignore. Everything I had learned from my individual clients would need to be amplified and coordinated across 18 businesses simultaneously. The first month was overwhelming in the best way possible. I spent every evening and weekend meeting with business owners, analyzing their financial records, and developing individualized improvement strategies. But unlike my previous consulting work, this project required me to think systemically. How could the bookstore and the coffee shop collaborate to increase foot traffic for both? Could the auto repair shop provide services to the delivery drivers from the restaurant? Was there a way for the fitness studio to partner with the health-focused businesses to create a wellness district identity? I created financial models that went beyond individual business success to demonstrate how coordinated marketing, shared resources, and strategic partnerships could benefit the entire district. I negotiated group rates for insurance, coordinated bulk purchasing agreements that reduced costs for multiple businesses, and designed a revenue-sharing system for collaborative events and promotions. 3 months into the project, something extraordinary happened. The preliminary results were so impressive that the Arizona SBDC asked me to present our progress at the National Small Business Conference in Denver. This wasn't a local networking event. This was the premier gathering of small business development professionals from across the United States. My presentation would be attended by federal officials, business school professors, economic development directors, and journalists covering entrepreneurship from major publications. I had never spoken to an audience larger than 15 people, but I accepted without hesitation. The night before my presentation, I stood in my hotel room in Denver, practicing my speech one final time. The girl who had been too awkward for her sister's engagement party was about to address 300 business development professionals about innovative financial strategies for community revitalization. The presentation was scheduled for the main conference hall at 2 p.m. on a Thursday. As I walked to the podium, I could see the audience filling the large auditorium. Men and women in business attire, notebooks open, phones ready to capture key insights. At the back of the room, I spotted a familiar logo on a banner, Business Week magazine, covering America's economic innovators. I began by sharing the individual stories of the Midtown businesses. Maria Elena's bookstore that had been in her family for 30 years but was losing customers to online retailers. Roberto's auto shop that provided essential services to the community but couldn't afford modern diagnostic equipment. And Sarah's fitness studio that had the expertise to help people transform their health, but lacked the financial systems to sustain growth. Each business needed comprehensive financial restructuring, but they also needed to work together as an interconnected economic ecosystem. The audience response was immediate and overwhelming. During the Q&A session, hands shot up throughout the auditorium. Business development directors wanted to know how they could replicate my coordination strategies in their own communities. Federal officials asked detailed questions about the financial models I had created. A representative from Goldman Sachs approached me afterwards to discuss potential consulting opportunities for their small business initiative.
But the moment that changed everything came from Dr. Patricia Williamson, the Dean of Entrepreneurship at Arizona State University's Business School. She waited until the crowd around me had thinned, then introduced herself with a proposition that left me speechless. Miss Rodriguez, I've been following your work since the SBDC project began, and your presentation today confirmed what I suspected. You've developed an approach to small business financial consulting that's genuinely innovative. We'd like to offer you a position as a lecturer in our entrepreneurship program, and we want to feature your Midtown project as a case study in our MBA curriculum. The position would be part-time, allowing me to continue my consulting work while teaching graduate students the financial strategies I had developed. But more than the professional opportunity, Dr. Williamson's offer represented something I had never experienced: academic recognition for intellectual achievement. A major university wanted to study and teach my methods. Within 2 weeks of returning from Denver, 3 major business publications had contacted me for interviews. Phoenix Business Journal wanted to feature me on their cover as Consultant of the Year. Entrepreneur Magazine was developing an article about innovative approaches to small business financial planning, with my work as the central example. The Arizona Republic was preparing a feature story about the Midtown Revitalization Project, focusing on the financial strategies that made the transformation possible. The interviews were unlike anything I had ever experienced. Instead of being asked to explain or justify my methods, journalists were asking me to share my insights as an established expert. They wanted to understand my philosophy, learn about my background, and capture my vision for the future of small business development. For the first time in my life, my ideas were being treated as inherently valuable and worth preserving for posterity. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from the business owners themselves. At our final group meeting in September, Roberto presented me with a custom-made plaque that read, "To Camille Rodriguez, who saw potential where others saw problems and created prosperity where others saw struggle." Maria Elena, the bookstore owner, had written a letter to the Arizona SBDC describing me as the most impactful professional I have ever worked with. Sarah, from the fitness studio, had nominated me for the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce's Business Professional of the Year award. As I drove home from that final meeting, my car filled with thank you gifts and letters of appreciation, I realized something profound had shifted. 6 months earlier, I had been the daughter who wasn't important enough to invite to her sister's engagement party. Now, I was being recognized as one of the most innovative financial consultants in the Southwest, with a university position, national media coverage, and a waiting list of businesses hoping to work with me. The girl who had been deemed too socially awkward for family celebrations had just successfully coordinated the most ambitious small business development project in Arizona's recent history. The daughter who didn't fit in with that crowd had presented her ideas to a national audience of business professionals and received a standing ovation. But the most satisfying realization was this: I no longer needed my family's approval to know my worth. The evidence was overwhelming, documented in financial reports, media coverage, and the gratitude of dozens of business owners whose lives I had genuinely improved. I had built something remarkable, and the entire business community was taking notice. My phone buzzed with another interview request. This time, it was from Forbes magazine, wanting to include me in their 30 under 30 list for finance and entrepreneurship. I smiled as I scheduled the interview, knowing that tomorrow would bring new opportunities, new recognition, and new proof that being underestimated had been the greatest gift my family could have given me. The moment I had been unconsciously building toward arrived on a Saturday evening in late October at the most unexpected place possible: the grand opening of Natasha's new workplace. Her resort company, Lux Desert Properties, was launching their flagship location in North Scottsdale, and they had planned an elaborate celebration to showcase their brand to Phoenix's elite social and business circles. I hadn't planned to attend. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks earlier, addressed to the Rodriguez family, with a handwritten note from Natasha, "Can't wait to celebrate with everyone." I had assumed, based on our family's recent pattern, that this was another event where my presence would be considered awkward or unwelcome. But then, Dr. Williamson from ASU called with news that changed everything. "Camille, I have an unusual request," she said during our Tuesday afternoon check-in.
Lux Desert Properties has reached out to the business school about featuring successful local entrepreneurs at their grand opening event. They specifically asked for you after reading the Phoenix Business Journal cover story. They want you to be part of a panel discussion about innovative business strategies that are reshaping Phoenix's economy. The irony was so perfect, it felt scripted. Natasha's employer wanted me as their featured business expert, while Natasha herself had no idea about my professional achievements. They were paying me $2,500 to participate in a 30-minute panel discussion, and they had requested that I bring materials about the Midtown Revitalization Project to display at their business showcase.
I accepted immediately, but I didn't tell my family about the professional invitation. As far as they knew, I was simply attending Natasha's work event as a supportive sister, finally making an effort to be more social and engaged with family activities. The Lux Desert Properties Resort was stunning, all glass and steel rising from the Sonoran Desert landscape, with infinity pools that seemed to merge with the horizon and landscaping that made the building appear to emerge naturally from the desert floor. As I walked through the entrance, wearing my best business suit, carrying a portfolio of my project materials, I felt the familiar pre-presentation adrenaline that had become my favorite sensation over the past 6 months. The main ballroom was filled with Phoenix's business and social elite. I recognized several faces from the Arizona Business Journal's annual Power Players issue, and spotted at least 3 state legislators mingling with resort industry executives and commercial real estate developers. The evening schedule included cocktails, dinner, and then the business panel discussion that would serve as the evening's keynote presentation. I found my family clustered near the bar, my parents dressed in their finest formal wear, beaming with pride as they introduced Natasha to various guests. She looked radiant in a flowing cocktail dress, her smile bright as she networked effortlessly with potential clients and industry contacts. This was her element, and she was clearly thriving in it. "Camille!" my mother exclaimed when she spotted me. "I'm so surprised you came! You usually avoid these kinds of events." Her tone carried that familiar mixture of surprise and mild disapproval, as if my presence was both unexpected and potentially problematic. I thought it was important to support Natasha, which was technically true, though not complete. My father nodded approvingly. "That's good. You should make more effort to be social. Maybe you'll meet some people who could help your career." He gestured toward the crowd of successful-looking professionals. "These are the kinds of connections that matter in business." I smiled and nodded, not mentioning that several of the people he was pointing to had already scheduled consulting appointments with Desert Bloom Financial, or that 3 others had approached me at the Denver conference to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. As dinner concluded, the resort's general manager, Patricia took the stage to introduce the evening's featured presentation. Tonight, we're honored to host a discussion about the innovative business strategies that are transforming Phoenix into one of America's most dynamic economic centers. Our panelists represent the cutting-edge thinking that's driving growth across multiple industries. She introduced the first panelist, a tech entrepreneur whose startup had just secured $15 million in venture capital funding. Then a real estate developer who had transformed downtown Phoenix's skyline with mixed-use developments. Finally, she turned toward my table. And finally, we're thrilled to feature Camille Rodriguez, the financial consultant whose groundbreaking work with the Arizona Small Business Development Center has been recognized nationally as a model for community economic development. Her Midtown Revitalization project was recently featured in Forbes, and she's been invited to present her strategies at business schools across the Southwest. The ballroom erupted in polite applause. But at my family's table, the reaction was pure shock. My parents' faces went completely white. Natasha's mouth fell open, her smile sprite frozen in place. My mother gripped her wine glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. I stood and walked to the stage, the same calm confidence I had felt in Denver carrying me forward. As I took my place at the panel table, I could see my family's table clearly from the stage. My father was leaning toward my mother, whispering urgently. Natasha was staring at me as if I had transformed into a completely different person. The moderator began with questions about innovative financial strategies for small businesses. I found myself in my element, discussing the systematic approach I had developed for coordinating multiple businesses,
the partnership models that had generated unexpected revenue streams, and the community-focused financial planning that had made the Midtown project so successful. Miss Rodriguez, the moderator continued, your work has been described as revolutionary. What drove you to develop these unique approaches to small business consulting? I think it comes from understanding what it feels like to be overlooked. Small businesses are often dismissed by traditional financial institutions because they don't fit conventional models. But when you take the time to really understand their potential, to see what others might miss, you can create extraordinary results. The irony of my words wasn't lost on me. I was describing my professional philosophy to a room full of influential people, while my family sat 20 feet away, realizing for the first time that the daughter they had consistently overlooked had been building something remarkable. During the Q&A portion, questions came from throughout the audience. A banker asked about my risk assessment models. A venture capitalist wanted to know about expansion strategies for service-based businesses. A city council member inquired about replicating the Midtown model in other Phoenix neighborhoods. But the question that mattered most came from Patricia Delacroix herself. Miss Rodriguez, can you tell us about your background? How did someone so young develop such sophisticated expertise in business development? I've been building Desert Bloom Financial for the past year and a half, working primarily with entrepreneurs who needed financial guidance but couldn't access traditional consulting services. What started as a way to help individual business owners evolved into a systematic approach for community economic development.
From the stage, I could see my father's expression shifting from shock to something approaching awe. My mother was whispering to other guests at their table, probably trying to process the fact that her socially awkward daughter was being treated as the evening's most impressive speaker. As the panel concluded, the audience responded with sustained applause. Patricia Delacroix announced that materials about my Midtown project would be available at a display table, and that I would be available for networking conversations during the remainder of the evening. The moment I stepped off the stage, I was surrounded by business cards and conversation requests. But I excused myself and walked directly to my family's table, where 4 faces stared at me with expressions ranging from bewilderment to something approaching respect. Camille's, my father began, his voice uncertain. We had no idea. Why didn't you tell us about your business? I looked at each of them calmly, feeling the power of the moment. You never asked. In fact, when I tried to talk about work, you usually changed the subject to something more interesting. Natasha found her voice first. But this is incredible. You're like actually famous in the business world. People here know who you are. Yes, I said simply. They do. My mother reached for my hand. Mija, we're so proud of you. This is amazing. We should celebrate this properly. The offer hung in the air between us, and I felt the familiar pull toward family approval that had driven so many of my choices over the years. But something had shifted fundamentally during my time on that stage. The validation I had been seeking from them for decades had come from somewhere else entirely, and it felt more solid and sustainable than anything they could offer. You know what's interesting about celebrations? I said, my voice steady and clear. They're most meaningful when they include the people who supported you during the difficult times, not just the people who want to be associated with you after the success. Patricia Delacroix approached our table at that moment, business card in hand. Miss Rodriguez, I wanted to personally thank you for participating tonight. Your presentation was exactly what we hoped for. Would you be available to discuss an ongoing consulting arrangement with Lux Desert Properties? As I turned to respond to her professionally, I felt my family's eyes on me, finally seeing me clearly for the first time. But the moment of recognition had come too late to change the fundamental dynamic between us. They were proud of me now because other people were impressed with me, not because they had discovered my worth independently. I'd be happy to discuss that, I told Patricia, accepting her business card with the same confidence I had carried throughout the evening.
My calendar is quite full, but I'm always interested in working with organizations that value innovative approaches. As Patricia walked away, I turned back to my family one more time. I should probably work the room a bit more. There are several people here who want to discuss potential projects. And with that, I walked away from their table, moving confidently into the crowd of business professionals who were waiting to meet the consultant they had just heard speak. For the first time in my life, I was walking away from my family not in hurt or anger, but in the quiet certainty that I had already found my place in the world, and it wasn't at their table. 2 years after that transformative evening at the Lux Desert Properties grand opening, I stood in the conference room of my own office space in downtown Phoenix, looking out at the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. Desert Bloom Financial now occupied 3,000 square feet in one of the most prestigious business towers in the Southwest, with a team of 8 full-time consultants and a client roster that included everyone from individual entrepreneurs to Fortune 500 companies seeking community development strategies. The Arizona Republic had just published a feature story calling me the architect of Arizona's small business renaissance, highlighting how the methodologies I developed had been adopted by economic development agencies in 12 states. Harvard Business School had invited me to guest lecture for their entrepreneurship program, and I was scheduled to deliver the keynote address at next month's National Community Development Conference in Chicago. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from something simpler. The wall in my office was covered with thank you letters, photos from ribbon-cutting ceremonies, and newspaper clippings featuring the business owners whose dreams I had helped transform into sustainable realities. Maria Elena's bookstore had expanded to 3 locations across Phoenix. Roberto's auto shop now employed 15 people and had become the go-to service center for several major corporate fleets. Sarah's fitness studio had franchised successfully in 2 other states. My personal life had undergone an equally remarkable transformation. 6 months after the Lux Desert Properties event, I met David Chen, a civil engineer who specialized in sustainable urban development, at a Phoenix Planning Commission meeting where we were both presenting on different aspects of the same neighborhood revitalization project. Our relationship developed naturally around shared professional values and genuine intellectual compatibility. David appreciated my analytical approach to problem solving, and I admired his ability to envision how physical infrastructure could support community economic growth. We had been engaged for 4 months now, planning a wedding that would be everything my sister's celebration was not: intimate, meaningful, and exclusively filled with people who had supported us during our individual journeys toward success. The guest list included 35 people, each chosen because they had contributed something genuine to our lives, rather than because they held the right social status or family position.
My family's attempts at reconciliation had been persistent but ultimately unsatisfying. 3 days after the Lux Desert Properties event, my mother had called to invite me to Sunday dinner, suddenly eager to hear all about your business success. My father had started mentioning my achievements to his golf partners and church friends, finally finding pride in a daughter he could brag about. Natasha had posted photos from the panel discussion on her Instagram with captions about her brilliant sister, hashtagging everything with hashtag family pride and hashtag business success. The invitations to family events had resumed, but with a notably different tone. Instead of being afterthoughts or obligations, I was now actively courted for my presence. When my Aunt Rosa planned her 60th birthday celebration, my mother specifically called to ensure I would attend because Rosa has been telling everyone about your success and really wants to talk to you about her catering business. When my cousin Miguel graduated from college, I received a personal invitation to speak with him about career planning because you're the most successful entrepreneur in the family. But the most telling moment came when Natasha announced her engagement, this time to a different man, a marketing executive she had met through her work connections. Within hours of her announcement, my mother called me directly. Camille, mija, we're planning the engagement party, and of course you'll be our guest of honor. We want to make sure everyone knows about your incredible achievements. Maybe you could even give a little speech about business success and family support. The irony was so complete it almost felt like satire. The same people who had excluded me from the previous engagement party because I would cause problems now wanted to feature me as the family's crowning achievement. They wanted to use my success as social currency, displaying me like a trophy to prove their worthiness as parents and siblings. I had politely declined the guest of honor role, agreeing only to attend as a regular family member. The engagement party, held at the same resort where I had first revealed my professional achievements, felt like watching a performance where I had been assigned the wrong role. My parents introduced me to other guests as our daughter, the famous business consultant, while Natasha made sure to mention my Forbes recognition and university position whenever conversation lagged. The attention felt hollow because it was based entirely on external validation rather than genuine understanding or appreciation. They were proud of my achievements, but they had never shown interest in the values, struggles, or personal growth that had made those achievements possible. They celebrated my success, but remained strangers to the person who had created it. The most revealing conversation happened during the engagement party reception when my father pulled me aside for what he clearly intended as a meaningful father-daughter moment. Camille, mija, I want you to know how proud I am of what you've built, he said, his voice carrying the weight of intended sincerity. I always knew you had potential, even when you were going through that quiet phase. We just wanted to help you find your confidence. The revisionist history was breathtaking. In his memory, my years of being dismissed and excluded had transformed into supportive encouragement. My awkwardness had become a quiet phase that they had patiently helped me overcome. The engagement party exclusion, which had devastated me 2 years earlier, was now reframed as tough love that had motivated my eventual success. I had smiled and thanked him for his support, but internally I felt the distance between us crystallizing into something permanent. They wanted credit for my achievements without acknowledging responsibility for the pain that had preceded them. They were proud of who I had become, but remained entirely uninterested in understanding the journey that had brought me there. The contrast with David's family could not have been more stark. His parents, both immigrants who had built successful careers in engineering and education, celebrated achievements but also valued character, integrity, and the quiet satisfaction of work well done. When I first met them, they asked thoughtful questions about my business philosophy and seemed genuinely interested in understanding how I approached problem-solving in client relationships. They appreciated my success, but they were more impressed by my commitment to helping other people achieve their goals. David's sister, Laura, a public school teacher, had become one of my closest friends after discovering that we shared similar experiences of being underestimated early in our careers. His younger brother, Marcus, was pursuing his MBA and had asked me to mentor him through his thesis project on community economic development. These relationships felt substantial and reciprocal, based on mutual respect rather than social obligation or reflected glory. As I planned my own wedding, the guest list became a clear reflection of the life I had chosen to build. David's family would be there, along with Dr. Williamson from ASU, Jonathan Rivera from the Arizona SBDC, and several of the business owners whose success stories had launched my career. My college roommate Jessica, who had given me my first consulting opportunity at her bakery, would serve as my maid of honor. The ceremony would be officiated by Roberto from the auto shop, who had gotten ordained online specifically so he could perform the service for the person who saved my business and changed my family's future.
My family would attend, but not in positions of honor or prominence. They would be seated with other relatives, welcomed as guests, but not celebrated as the architects of my happiness. The people who would speak at our reception were those who had supported us during the challenging times, not those who wanted to be associated with us after the success. 3 weeks before the wedding, my mother made one final attempt to insert herself into the center of our celebration. She called to suggest that she should give a speech about how we raised you to be so successful and how family support is the foundation of all achievement. Mom, I said gently, I appreciate that you want to be part of the celebration, but the speeches are reserved for people who were part of our journey toward each other. You're welcome to attend and enjoy the evening, but David and I have chosen to focus on the relationships that helped us become the people we wanted to be. The silence that followed was long and uncomfortable, filled with her realization that she was not among those relationships. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a hurt that I recognized, but could no longer absorb as my responsibility. I don't understand why you're still angry about the past. We're proud of you now. Isn't that what matters? It's not about anger. It's about authenticity. The people speaking at our wedding are those who saw our potential before it was proven, who supported us during uncertainty, and who celebrated our character as much as our achievements. Love that appears only after success isn't the same as love that endures through struggle. The wedding itself was everything I had never dared to imagine during those years of feeling invisible and unwanted. Under a canopy of desert stars, surrounded by people who had chosen to invest in my happiness long before it became socially advantageous. I married a man who valued my analytical mind, appreciated my methodical approach to life, and found my quiet intensity attractive rather than problematic. Roberto's officiation was heartfelt and personal, referencing the transformation he had witnessed not just in my business acumen, but in my confidence and self-worth. Dr. Williamson spoke about the intellectual courage required to develop innovative approaches to complex problems. Jessica told stories about our early friendship and the determination she had seen in me long before anyone else recognized it. My parents attended and smiled appropriately, but they were spectators to a celebration they had not helped create. The joy in that desert ceremony belonged to the community I had built through authenticity, service, and mutual respect, rather than the community I had been born into through accident of genetics. As David and I danced our first dance under the Arizona stars, I felt the profound satisfaction of a life constructed deliberately rather than inherited passively. The girl who had once been excluded from her sister's engagement party for being too awkward had created her own celebration filled with people who found her exactly awkward enough, exactly serious enough, exactly herself enough to deserve their presence, their support, and their love. The validation I had once sought from my family had been replaced by something far more substantial, the knowledge that I had built a life of genuine value, touched by relationships that enhanced, rather than diminish, my authentic self. That knowledge belonged entirely to me, earned through years of choosing growth over resentment, purpose over approval, and substance over appearance. And as I looked out at our guests, entrepreneurs whose dreams I had helped realize, colleagues who respected my expertise, friends who valued my character, I realized that being excluded from my family's version of celebration had been the greatest gift they could have given me. It had forced me to discover that the most meaningful celebrations are those we create ourselves, filled with people who choose to love us not despite our differences, but because of them.